Story 1. I went to war and saw the terrible things that humans do to each other in the name of religion. Either God doesn't exist or he doesn't care. Either way, it doesn't matter to me anymore. Story 2. I quickly realized that many of the stories people thought were absolutely true seemed silly to me. When I was around 13, I was in a religious class preparing to be confirmed in the Catholic Church, and I was the only one who said I believed in evolution. Story 3. The disconnect between the actual teachings of Christ and the people who claim to be Christians but believe that feeding the poor and housing the homeless is a waste of tax dollars. Story 4. Critical thinking involves understanding that just because your parents say something, it does not make it true. Story 5. My religious mother contracted a degenerative disease which eventually became fatal, and there was a priest at my church who was a pedophile. Fortunately, I was never victimized by him. Story 6. Going to university and learning about world history, reading a history of God, and finally admitting to myself that none of it made any sense and I never believed it anyway. Story 7. My parents enrolled me in religious classes. I was probably 12 when I realized this was ridiculous nonsense. How did that old man get 2 lions on a giant boat without getting ripped to shreds? Story 8. Ex-Muslim. Besides the obvious growth and development of critical thinking skills, I must say that the treatment of women in Islam and its view on dogs influenced my perspective. I then studied a great deal of science and recognized that religion serves primarily as a method of control and cannot be supported by evidence. Story 9. Not to be too dramatic about it, but I asked for faith and faith was not given to me. This is one of the greatest disappointments of my life. Story 10. I did not feel connected to what was being taught. I do not like to do things out of fear of damnation. I also experienced negative situations with people who were supposed to be faithful. It is such a Trojan horse in many ways. People behave as if nothing happens or that everything happens because of this entity. I always felt the stories of God sounded like an abusive, narcissistic deity. Love me or suffer, obey me or suffer, and even when you do, you still suffer. Story 11. I decided that, within the moral standards my religion taught me, the deity I was instructed to worship was not someone I cared to venerate. I could not find any other religious belief that seemed more likely to be the correct one. Story 12. The more I read, the less it made sense. I truly wanted to believe, but I realized I will never have the kind of faith that overrides logical thinking. It's a shame, but I can't help it. Story 13. I lost my faith after experiencing bullying at a large church event. It was a massive church camp that attracted children from all over the nation. I figured that if this is how Christians behave, I do not want to be part of it. Story 14. Stressed me out. I concluded that if God existed, they wouldn't really care if we believed in them. If they judged us in some afterlife, how we lived would be more important. God obviously isn't working miracles on earth, unless they are unkind. Story 15. Taking philosophy and realizing that Christian philosophers were presenting weak arguments, along with the problem of evil. Story 16. The hypocrisy of the Catholic Church in reading the Bible is evident. I believe faith is a beautiful thing and that religion can be great, but not the actions taken in the name of religion. Story 17. High school biology covered a section on evolution. I asked a question about Adam and Eve, and my professor replied, "I'm not legally allowed to answer that question." It was the first time any teacher did not answer or attempt to answer a question, especially stating that they could not due to legal reasons. Story 18. Being gay and unable to pray it away. Then other Christians showed disgust. I saw that unconditional love is not real. I'm not sure I'm an atheist, but I'm not buying what they are selling. Story 19. Realizing that God is a man-made concept. The idea of a deity or a creator was established by humans to explain a universe they did not understand. Humans created God to explain their own sentience. Story 20. As with many children, Santa, the benign home invader, was my gateway to belief. He sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, he knows if you've been bad or good. When I discovered wrapped presents in a closet from Santa, I realized I had been deceived and wondered what other myths I had been expected to accept. At least they had gone to the trouble of creating proof for Santa. There was none for the existence of any deity. I decided, though not in so many words, that a god was simply Santa without presence, for people who couldn't find it within themselves to just be good without the threat of eternal damnation. Story 21. I was a true believer until college. I believed the Bible was inerrant and inspired by God. Then I learned there was a process of canonizing the Bible. I encountered the problem of good and evil, and no one could provide a satisfactory explanation. I also had personal experiences that revealed deep hypocrisy in my church. Gradually, I let go of my beliefs. Since then, I have discovered even more evidence that contradicts my earlier beliefs. Story 22. The hypocrisy of evangelicals is striking. They often claim to be good people and follow the teachings of the Lord, yet they express hatred towards others. Additionally, placing Donald Trump, known for his offensive comments, on a pedestal is astonishing. These individuals criticize Clinton for his indiscretions but conveniently ignore the behavior of Trump, Boebert, Green, and others who exploit the Bible for their agendas. Story 23. Going to college for science and philosophy has expanded my worldview and made me realize the immense hypocrisy present in society. I appreciate the teachings of Jesus, but the actions of many of his followers do not reflect his messages. Story 24. Reading the Bible and studying the history of its edits and ecumenical councils reveal the cruelty of many Christians and the role of logic in these discussions. Story 25. It always sounded nonsensical to me. Then, I observed the actions of religious individuals and studied the history of the church. Story 26. Religion is highly regional but has spread based on military strength. East Asia and Native American tribes have completely different theories about the origin of the universe. Moreover, the sheer size of the universe makes Earth seem insignificant. Story 27. Being told that my Muslim mother and her side of the family would go to hell repeatedly as a child while also hearing to love thy neighbor. Story 28. I read the Bible. There are many contradictions in it. One of the more famous ones is the death of Judas Iscariot. There are multiple claims regarding the circumstances of his death. Story 29. The moment the religious leaders used the Bible to justify the hate and persecution of fellow human beings, it became clear that understanding the scripture requires more than just listening to sermons. It demands active reading and reflection. Story 30. Learning science, I guess, just the logic didn't make sense. Evolution makes sense. Gravity and the Big Bang make sense. Additionally, the idea of going to heaven with a group of self-righteous individuals was not appealing to me. Story 31. I was already having doubts, but when I was 11, my sister died. Many of the adults in my life told me that she had gone to a better place and that God chose her because he wanted her, and I was extremely angry. Story 32. My brother attended Bible college with the intention of becoming a pastor but emerged as an atheist. He mentioned that even across the hall in the same building, they could not agree on what the truth was. Eventually, he decided to believe in nothing at all. Story 33. My uncle, who was a preacher, told me I was going to hell at 8 years old for listening to a non-Christian band. I have heard church members making fun of homeless individuals, those who are terminally ill, and mentally ill people. I know at least 4 people who have cheated on their respective spouses. The hypocrisy of followers is what caused me to lose faith and belief. If you need a different reason, read the book of Job or the story of Abraham and Isaac. Story 34. When I think about someone creating the entirety of the universe and everything in it, it's hard to believe that they would care about whether I prayed or had a sexual relationship with someone of the same gender. It's absurd. A deity creates the Andromeda galaxy and then says, "You may not show your hair if you're a woman. Don't waste my time." Story 35. As I grew up and my critical thinking skills developed, I realized that it was unhelpful and caused more harm than good in society. It breaks my heart that it is 2025 and so many adults still have imaginary friends who dictate their lives. Story 36. I grew up in a religious environment in a small town in Alberta. I joined the Navy and experienced the world beyond Canada. I came to realize that much of what I believed was untrue. I decided to turn my back on all forms of religion. It was a straightforward decision. Story 37. I identify more as agnostic. I was raised Catholic, attended Catholic school, and was very involved in the church. For me, it was learning that atheists and other non-believers are normal people. Yet, church doctrine stated they would not go to heaven. That did not make sense to me. I was friends with these individuals. Then I became philosophical. These individuals struggle to believe because they are logical thinkers. Their minds cannot grasp the concept of a God. But didn't God create these people? So, he gave them minds that would not believe in him. Yet he is going to punish them for having those minds? That again makes no sense. It was a gradual departure from religion. I am out of it now. Looking back, I see issues I was unaware of at the time. I still respect the religion. I do not hate it. It is just not for me. It is definitely flawed, but I do not look down on anyone who practices. I simply disagree with their beliefs. Story 38. It became clear when asking questions about religion that most people I spoke to were just trying to stop the conversation at any cost rather than actually providing answers, especially if you dig deeper and push for more rigorous inquiry. At that time in my life, I was a true believer, so I expected that asking questions would be welcome and met with easy, convincing answers, since it was all true, right? Instead, everyone was suddenly defensive, evasive, vague, and acting like a salesperson when you show up a week later with questions about a problem with what they sold you. That opened my eyes to the previously unthinkable possibility that this might not have a solid basis in fact. Since then, I have kept an open mind to be swayed by religious or spiritual ideas, but so far nothing has really checked out. Who knows what tomorrow may bring? Story 39. Realizing that even if something exists beyond this, no one on this planet would have any idea. All religions are a form of cult. Story 40. I was raised Catholic, and as soon as I developed critical thinking skills around 11 or 12 years old, it was evident that none of it made sense. Story 41. I was raised as a Christian until I turned 13. At that age, I began to ask myself some simple questions, such as if God can quench all evil, why doesn't he? If God is all-powerful, can he create a rock he cannot lift? Why would God create insects that burrow into children's eyes to reproduce? I then determined that there is no God. It didn't really feel any different, so I'm not sure I ever really understood what I believed. As I've grown older, I found myself leaning the other way again. I'm convinced that the Christian God is false, but I now believe that there is something out there. Whether the universe has a will or some other being is guiding it, I'm not sure, but I no longer believe that there is no higher power. Story 42. Logic and a pastor attempted to integrate quantum physics into his teachings about what lies beyond death. By trying to bridge belief and knowledge, he touched on insights I had that were unrelated to his faith. Story 43. Trauma from losing family. I do not blame anyone for it. I have simply lost faith and might be agnostic. I'm just here for a good time. Story 44. My life with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, then a YouTuber who did an unsugar-coated reading of the Bible really opened my eyes. Story 45. There is a lack of scientific evidence for the existence of a deity, as well as inaccuracies in religious teachings. Additionally, maturity plays a role in understanding these concepts. Ultimately, some view religion and the idea of a deity as mere fairy tales. Story 46. I have a story concept I've been thinking about in which an all-powerful alien proves to Earth that there is no God or afterlife, but sets up a virtual reality that can upload the imprint of your consciousness at death. It then provides you with the afterlife you expect, like purgatory for Catholics or your own little blue world for Mormons. Story 47. I was in elementary school when my grandma showed me the Orthodox rosary. She told me that it makes your wishes come true. I then said something like, "Then I can wish for good grades in school." She replied, "You have to make an effort for that to come true." After that, I wondered what the point of the rosary and God was if you had to do everything by yourself. I wasn't religious, but I wasn't an atheist either at that time. However, that revelation made me question religion. It doesn't make it easier growing up in an environment full of older generations who were communists for most of their lives. It was Yugoslavia in question, where religion was discouraged and initially even forbidden. Many of them became fanatics after Tito's death. Story 48. Not necessarily atheistic but no longer affiliated with organized religion, visiting the Vatican was significant. I found it hypocritical that they displayed gold and priceless art while telling their followers to contribute financially to the church. The final straw for me was when my local church had to retract statements made by the Pope when he said that gay individuals are people too. Story 49. I asked questions when I was a child, as I couldn't understand the differences between what they claimed was true according to the Bible and what I believed to be true based on logic. They did not like that. Since this took place in a Catholic school, I experienced various forms of abuse except for sexual abuse, shockingly enough. I was even told by my principal that I was the son of the devil and that I didn't deserve to live. I was 8 years old at the time. If anyone is wondering what I did nothing. My only real sin was asking questions and having undiagnosed autism. Yet that seemed to justify 2 years of borderline torture. 12 years later, I was diagnosed with childhood post-traumatic stress disorder. Clearly, the God they follow and the God in the Bible are two very different beings. If they can sleep easy after abusing a child, driving him towards suicide, and making him feel weak and powerless, then the God they are praying to is not one worthy of my worship. Story 50. Reality did not work the way it was supposed to according to the religion. Because what should be did not match what is, I concluded that there were probably some fundamental flaws in the framework that governed that religion specifically, and most likely all religions generally. Story 51. Attending seminary and studying church history and Western Christian theology feels fabricated. Debating the attributes of a deity all day seems like a significant waste of time. Story 52. I attended a Catholic high school. Although I am not Catholic myself, I am Protestant. The religion classes were optional for me, so I took the class in my first year, and there was a significant amount of indoctrination. I almost bought into it because I was young and impressionable. I'm not sure when I figured it out, but it just didn't add up. I was very anti-religion for a long time. Nowadays, I consider myself an atheist, but I attend a wonderful inclusive church where everyone is welcome, and there is no pressure to believe anything other than being a good person. Story 53. I cannot believe that there is a being that is so powerful and does nothing to ease the most basic issues facing humanity. Religious beliefs exist to help humans feel better about themselves and their actions in the name of religion. Story 54. I was never really religious, but reading Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens irreversibly sealed the deal. Of course, the biggest factor in deciding whether you are a Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, or Muslim is the sheer geographical accident of birth, which is a slight giveaway. We laugh at Santa, the Tooth Fairy, or even recent cults, but when it comes to what is written in ancient texts and what is indoctrinated from a young age, we start becoming dogmatic, offended, or are eager to start and wage wars. Humanity truly is irrational. Now, does hell exist? Certainly. It exists in our own minds, through our actions, and physically on Earth in some locations right now, most often due to our own doing. Story 55. I am not fully an atheist, but mostly leaning in that direction. There is a small feeling in the back of my mind that there has to be something behind all of this, but I am okay with saying I don't know. I was raised Catholic, and even as a child, it never really made sense to me. I went on a spiritual journey after the death of my mother that made everything seem even less sensible. Here we are. Story 56. It wasn't any one event, but being told the Holocaust was God's way of punishing Jews for killing Jesus was incredibly disturbing and felt like it went against all the teachings from Sunday school. Story 57. Not an atheist, but a pantheist. I was very skeptical about Christianity and religion in general as a youth, so my parents encouraged me to educate myself on the subject before forming an opinion. I explored various aspects of religion, particularly religious history. I read the King James Bible, the Torah, the New Jerusalem Bible, and about half of the Quran. Through my research, I reached one conclusion: organized religion is not for me. Now, I simply sit back and let nature and the universe bring joy to my life. Story 58. I gave myself permission to ask some difficult questions. I realized it was all quite silly. I consider myself more agnostic now, but it takes time to unpick a lifetime of indoctrination. Story 59. Religion gradually faded away in my family over time. Each new generation is slightly less religious than the one before it. While my grandmother is still the type to attend church every Sunday, my mother only goes when she feels like it. My siblings and I stopped attending as we got older, and my nephew has never gone to church at all. Story 60. I identify as an agnostic atheist, so I feel equipped to answer as well. I was raised in Christianity, but I have always loved reading. As I discovered new cultures, histories, and philosophies, I realized that Christianity was not a universal truth, but rather a cultural and regional heritage. I also became disillusioned by my experiences with nuns at my Catholic school and with the contradictory dogmas I encountered, even as a child. For example, why couldn't I have long hair if Jesus did? Why did the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," not apply to war? And how could the church support war? Were Marcelinho's parents going to hell just because they got divorced? Later, while studying science, philosophy, and history, it became clear to me that religion serves as a social paradigm around which people gather to maintain a moral framework that supports coexistence and law enforcement. While it is useful, this usefulness is not sufficient to validate its core beliefs, especially since that core can change depending on the interests of the time and place. Story 61. Rampant child sexual abuse using the position of the priesthood occurs while people attempt to ignore it. I attended some Christian Bible camp events as well, and many of the kids there smoked and drank because they were excited to be away from their parents. The entire situation feels insincere. People participate to be seen as good individuals, and rarely for any other reason. I learned from the Good Samaritan and chose to embrace a path different from Christianity to avoid becoming like the Pharisees. Story 62. Free will versus God's knowledge has me perplexed. If choice X leads me to hell and God possesses perfect knowledge, that means he knew countless years ago that I was created solely to be sent to hell, and there is nothing I can do to alter that path. After your first glimpse behind the curtain, the rest begins to appear quite absurd very quickly. Story 63. I realize that your practiced religion has nothing to do with actual truth. It is almost entirely based on the zip code in which you happen to be born. I also concluded that Christianity is contradictory, full of plot holes and manipulation to maintain the storyline. Even if God is entirely real, the God of the Bible is definitively a narcissistic abuser, and I do not want anything to do with that kind of deity. Story 64. I argue like I breathe. Once I was out of my religious bubble, it became clear that my ideas didn't hold up to scrutiny. It came in waves. You have to deconstruct starting at the top of the scaffold. Story 65. The lack of respect for others by imposing their views and manipulation is what keeps people engaged. Story 66. Realizing that a world with a God who acts in mysterious ways as an excuse for avoidable suffering is strikingly similar to a world where he doesn't exist. Evolution has given us a pattern-recognizing brain to identify and avoid predators. Instead, we often hallucinate about patterns being caused by a magical, purposeful entity. God has a plan for everyone. Story 67. My depression caused deeper and more critical thinking. I've realized I'm Christian because of the place I was born. I could have been Muslim. So why do I believe in this God and not the other one? There is no God. A caring God would not allow people to suffer so greatly that they dream about death or become traumatized. A small child dies and goes to heaven, and I am expected to be good my entire life? There is no logic in this. I don't remember how religion was invented, but I know it helps some people and can harm others. I dislike when religious people try to make me believe. I do not try to convert them to atheism. Most of the time, depression distorts your perception, but in this case, it helped me see things as they are. It was very hard for me to come to this realization. I needed time to process, but I feel better now as an atheist. There are no false hopes that God will help me, and no guilt about being a bad person. Story 68. The concept of God in various scriptures, whether it be the Quran, the Bible, or Jewish texts, often portrays a limited view of the divine. In my opinion, the creator of vast, expanding universes and the intricacies of all living beings must be immense, amazing, and pure. However, the narratives in these scriptures can make God seem so small. This perspective is why I could easily lean towards atheism. Story 69. My mother was an avid reader, and I took one of the books I was not allowed to read when I was around 5 or 6 years old. The main character did not believe in a higher power, and it resonated with my view of the world. Story 70. Slowly moving towards an agnostic perspective over several years as I learned more about history. Then, a significant shift to atheism through bereavement. I felt anger towards a deity I no longer believed in, and that was it. Story 71. I belonged to a high-control religion. It took me years to work my way out, but once I did, becoming an atheist happened very quickly. Once you realize you have been misled, it is easy to see deceit everywhere else. Story 72. Studying religion, especially art history, reveals that religion often serves as a tool of oppression. Even for those who do not share this belief, it is difficult to reconcile the immense violence committed in the name of religion with the concept of a benevolent deity. Considering the widespread misinformation and the weaponization of information, along with the pain and suffering caused by religion, I find it easier to believe that in ancient times, evil prevailed and portrayed themselves as the righteous, using religion to inflict harm and suffering under the guise of goodness ever since. Story 73. The way the people at my church treated marginalized communities and discussed other belief systems. Story 74. When I was a child, I asked many questions and rarely received fulfilling answers, or at least answers that felt complete. It was not until I became an adult that I realized everything is based on emotion. Our creative minds try to rationalize our life experiences and the finality of death. It is our way of processing our circumstances and our actions, as well as the actions of others. Faith is the belief in something that cannot be proven. Faith is fundamentally an emotion, and once I recognized this, it became clear why discussing or debating these topics is so challenging. You can present facts, but when a person's beliefs are rooted in feelings, it is like mixing oil and water. You are speaking a different language. For example, it is like trying to reason with a friend who is madly in love, even though you know the other person is not genuine or is treating them poorly. Their intense emotion essentially blocks anything you may say. Story 75. There are many contradictions, and when you point them out, it is often perceived as a misinterpretation on your part. It also seems strange that salvation was primarily based on where I lived. When I was younger, I always wondered why people from the Middle East chose Islam instead of my religion. As I aged, I began to understand why. People seemed to follow only what they wanted. For example, when Jesus said to feed the hungry, it did not mean having the government set up food assistance programs. It meant we should actively feed the hungry, but we rarely did this. Instead, we donated to the church, which felt like paying money to avoid addressing the problem. I also disliked how it appeared to train people to be authoritarian and susceptible to propaganda. There is much more to this, but in short, I liked the message of the New Testament, although I felt it was not applied to those outside the religion. Story 76. Reading and learning about the historical origins of Jesus, the writing of the books of the Bible, and the formation of the churches. Realizing that there is no way a human rose from the dead. Story 77. I attended a Christian elementary school. It was a difficult experience. The constant reminders of going to hell for various actions increased my anxiety and depression. As an adult, learning about significant events such as September 11th, the Holocaust, and childhood cancer solidified my belief that God isn't real. Story 78. Have you seen Christian these days? If there is a God, I wouldn't want anything to do with it if that's how its devoted followers behave. Story 79. Praying for years and feeling ignored. During my teenage years, I read the Bible and applied common sense. Story 80. Someone said to read the Bible from beginning to end, and you will be convinced it is true. I did that and was extremely convinced it was simply written by humans 2,000 years ago who did not understand the nature of the universe. Story 81. There is little evidence, as each religion claims the same without proving the existence of their deity. Additionally, there is no evidence for a spiritual realm. Otherwise, we would have a dedicated field of science exploring it. Story 82. For me, It seemed that many individuals who are religious belong to a specific faith based on their geographical location or their parents' beliefs. Additionally, numerous religions assert that those who do not believe will face punishment. Yet they also claim that their deity is all-knowing. This implies that their deity chooses to inflict suffering on individuals for being born into the wrong family or region. Story 83. I grew up attending a Christian church and was even the president of a Christian after-school club in 8th grade. Two events led to my questioning of faith. First, I admired my youth minister. He was an excellent role model, supportive and non-judgmental. He was trusting and fun to be around. The church fired him because he requested a better salary after working there for 8 years. He had a wife and 2 children, and they terminated him to hire a young, unmarried college student at a lower wage. The second event was that I lost my virginity in 8th grade, and the entire school found out. I was told I could not be the president of the Christian club anymore because of my perceived sin. At that moment, I began to seriously question the concept of God, Christianity, and the behavior of some Christians. I attended a Christian school for 10th grade, and that experience was the last straw. There was a class called Evolution versus Creation, a non-biased look at the facts. The textbook was written by the teacher, and it was anything but unbiased. I began to believe in science and study the creation of the universe. Now, when I look back, having faith in a God created by man to control societies seems unfathomable to me. I will never go back. Also, Mary was not a virgin. Story 84. I didn't let myself question for a long time because my family believed. My grandmother, much to my mother's dismay, told me not to read or watch the Spiderwick Chronicles because the author isn't Christian. I am pretty sure she thought it was Harry Potter. So, I looked to Christians for guidance during much of my childhood. I attended youth group and went to church camp throughout middle school. I loved the movie God's Not Dead. Then I started dating an atheist who asked me questions I couldn't answer, which got the gears turning. I didn't really want to go to church after that. Story 85. Having to go to church and then Sunday school, and not eating on Sundays before church according to Eastern Orthodoxy, left me feeling burdened. At some point, when I was still a child, I flatly refused to go to church. From that point on, I spent Sundays doing things I actually enjoyed, like playing video games at my grandparents' house. Story 86. Watching Carl Sagan, Bill Nye, and other science educators, I recognize that saying, "I don't know," is not only acceptable but necessary to truly understand how the universe works. If you cannot acknowledge your knowledge gaps, you cannot learn and grow. Story 87. One too many explanations of God works in mysterious ways, for things that were clearly just bad planning. Story 88. Reading books and obtaining degrees is fascinating. It's remarkable how quickly and thoroughly one can challenge an organized religion by posing slightly complex questions about it. Story 89. As you transition from childhood, your critical thinking skills strengthen. The ability to apply logical thought critically to religion is all that is needed to move beyond it. Story 90. Challenging experiences in my life have led me to question many things. However, I wouldn't label myself as completely atheist or fully religious. I don't have strong feelings either way. I am indifferent about the subject and don't participate in church activities, as they often feel forced and insincere. I believe that if there is a higher power, it is a personal connection between me and that power. I have never relied on religion to be a good person. Recently, a churchwoman told me, "Jesus loves you," and I responded, "He better. I'm a badass." I don't think she found it amusing. Story 91. I was in my 8th grade theology class at a private Catholic school and had just become acquainted with body dysmorphia and depression. At that time, I was really struggling with self-harm, and during the lesson, my teacher said that if you hurt yourself intentionally in any way, you will go to hell. For me, this was a huge turning point. How could a God that was so full of love automatically dismiss me for hurting so much and struggling? It didn't add up, and over the next few years, I slowly faded out of religion completely. Spirituality has become more of my focus and personally makes more sense. Story 92. The truth came to me while I was walking home from school. I was still young, and I think I had just reached the point where I could reason it out. Story 93. Realizing all the lies I was told to stay in line. Ghosts and monsters aren't real, but the devil is and will appear as whatever you are scared of to turn you from God. Don't watch that show or movie because the devil will take their form and try to turn you from God. Don't wear a wire hanger around your neck because the devil will send an angel to close it and choke you to death. Don't walk close to that ledge. The devil will push you off. Dinosaurs aren't real. The fossils were put there by the devil to turn you from God. You can't watch Pokemon anymore because they evolve, and we don't believe in evolution. Your cousin is gay. You can be nice to them, but remember they are going to hell, and don't let her convince you otherwise. And when I started asking questions, I'm worried you're getting too smart, and all the intelligent people turn away from God. Story 94. I grew up Catholic, but the church sex abuse scandal quickly changed my perspective. I couldn't think about it the same way again. Studying and reflecting on it made me realize that it was all just nonsense. Story 95. On the contrary, I am an atheist who is thoroughly convinced that Trump is the Antichrist, which surely proves that there is a real Christ. I think I might be walking into Christianity backwards. Story 96. Over time, I began to question certain beliefs and realized that many of them were based on tradition rather than evidence. I explored different perspectives, examined my own experiences, and understood that I didn't need religion to live a meaningful life. It wasn't an overnight change, but rather a gradual shift in how I viewed the world. Story 97. Just listening to others talk about religion, going to church is a significant aspect. I have attended multiple services, and most of the time they read a passage from the Bible, followed by a large emphasis on fundraising. Additionally, there are about 3,000 religions in the world, and even in modern times, there is still no concrete proof of a deity. If a God does exist, the level of destruction and violence in the world raises serious questions. Story 98. Primarily religious individuals. Additionally, trusting a single book that has been edited and manipulated by many people, distorting its meaning to the point where it is difficult to determine which version is true. There are many religions, and all of them claim to be the one. Attempting to tie morality to religion turns it into a means to criticize those who disagree with you. Out of all that, I have not mentioned a specific religion. You may fill in your own blanks as you wish, as they apply equally across the board. Story 99. Everything is created by humans. Religion is created by humans. The stories, the morality, the tools we use, and the places we go in all these narratives. All of it is human-made. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.